Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So last week I talked about the Blue Sword, and this week I will do The Hero and the Crown, which is the, prequel, the prequel that was written after the book that supposedly comes after it, The Hero and the Crown. So this is the story of, well, it's not really the story of where Guntoran comes from, because let's be honest, by the end of this book, we still don't know where the Blue Sword came from, because when Aerin is handed the sword by Luth, the sorcerer with whom she has a brief affair and kind of falls in love with, even though she marries somebody else anyways, Aerin is handed the sword by Luth, who says, yeah, she's got this, she's a really powerful magical sword and stuff, and I went on all of these, trials and travails and distant traveling to find her, and here, have a sword. But Guntoran already has a weight of history attached to her. We'll just never know that history. It's one of the things that you can do with any, fantasy world, speculative fiction world, to make it bigger, is to tell people straight up, there's more here, but I'm not going to tell it to you. Just know that there's more here. So this is a slightly inaccurate cover in that, yes, there is a giant black dragon that she fights and defeats by probably at least partly sheer luck. And yes, she has a white horse. Well, I mean, he's a gray because there is no such thing as a white horse. All white horses are, in fact, gray horses, which is a weird technicality of both terminology and the fact that if you look at any white horse really, really closely, they'll have a few dark hairs anyways. So technically they're not actually white unless they're albino, I guess, but albinos don't count. Because, I mean, albinos never count in this kind of conversation because, a sport doesn't really count for the natural state of affairs. Anyways, but what makes this slightly inaccurate is that while indeed the dragon breathes fire on her, first of all, her horse isn't in the line of fire when that happens, and second, when that happens with the big dragon, Mar, M-A-U-R, however that's supposed to be pronounced, it's a little like, the dragon Smaug, which everybody used to pronounce as smog until we realized, oh, right, smog, that stuff in the air that we're not supposed to breathe. That's a problem. Anyways, Mor, the great black dragon who has woken up from a goodness knows how long centuries nap, she goes and defeats him, but the thing is that dragons are a thing in Damar at that point in history, but they're relatively small. They are, as she winds up putting it at one point, or Tor winds up putting it at one point, Tor is the man she eventually marries, they're vermin. They're incredibly dangerous. I mean, they breathe fire and they have claws and they, like eating stuff. So, they're very dangerous, but a small dragon can still be taken down by, if nothing else, a bunch of people with bows. The great dragons, on the other hand, are scaled up not just in size, but in the amount of power behind their fire and in the strength of their armor. And so when she goes up against it, she's found a recipe for something that protects you against dragon fire, except that because Mor's dragon fire is scaled up, it's kind of like the difference between running your finger through a candle and running your finger through plasma. There are things that you can do safely with candles that you can't do safely with, things that are hotter than candles. And so Mor manages to really rather viciously burn her because, well, the salve she found keeps her from dying pretty much instantly, but if her horse had been in the path of that fire, Talat would not have made it. Anyways, so Aerin is a princess and an unsatisfactory princess. And she's not unsatisfactory in a, Cimmerian of the Enchanted Forest Chronicles kind of way. She's unsatisfactory because her mother is from the north, and the north is filled with demons. So a woman from the north marrying the king is considered immensely suspect, and when she dies, Aerin is known as the witch woman's daughter. She's also clumsy. She's also not tremendously pretty. Although she is a redhead, so for those of you with a redhead kink, there you go. But the thing is that she has no real place. Her father doesn't groom her for the throne, which, as she later points out, they don't like letting they don't like letting girls, princesses who are actually, properly of the blood and everything else inherit the throne. So, a princess who's only just barely avoided being born out of wedlock because they let the king marry Aerin's mother, they just didn't let her be queen. And so Aerin isn't really anywhere close to the direct line of succession anyways. But as she points out, they don't like letting women take the throne at that point anyhow, so, odds are good that even if they had accepted her, she wouldn't have gotten the throne, so what does that matter? Anyhow, but as the story goes on and she gets older, she finds this recipe for something that will stop dragon fire, and when a new dragon appears and somebody comes up to the king and says, please, your majesty, please send us somebody because there is a dragon that's going to terrorize our village, she leaves ahead of everyone else and defeats the dragon on her own because she has found something that makes her immune to dragon fire. And that's several chapters into the book, because we've already had a clear establishment of Aerin as somebody who isn't well liked, who has very few friends, who is clumsy, who does have trouble, and who, unlike everyone else, doesn't have any magic. Now, magic in this stage in Damar's history, you'll remember last week I talked about how the magic is kind of this thing with a mind of its own that isn't necessarily useful. Well, in The Hero and the Crown, the gift, the Kalar, it's useful. It does stuff. You can do things with it, like make illusions and, turn flowers into magic birds that sing people's names, which is a thing that happens, and you can do a lot of stuff with magic, but she doesn't have any. And so so that alone would have made her something of a pariah, because of course she's seen as being less than everyone else because she doesn't have magic. But with everything else, she just exists on the outside. Anyhow, but the whole dragon thing, her going and killing dragons and becoming a dragon slayer more or less professionally, it gives her a reputation and carves her out a place, not necessarily in the court, but small villages who are grateful to see her, who are happy to have her show up and deal with their dragons, who see her as a hero and a rescuer. And so when Mor wakes up from his slumber, her father is about to have to go to war with someone else. He can't spare any men. He can't do anything. As he said, one of the things that he says is he leaves the messenger saying, when we come back, we'll deal with it, is that this thing that we're about to face, it could rip the country apart. And what's the point in saving the country from Mor if there's no country to come back to? Like, it's very much a rock and a hard place sort of decision. But Aerin goes on her own to face a dragon that is, well, as big as we see in this cover illustration. And she wins, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. She's dying by the end of it. And, she goes home and she survives, but she's clearly dying. And that's when Luth intervenes. And Luth is a sorcerer who does also appear in The Blue Sword. And he manages to send her visions to come to him, which it takes her a while to sort of decide she's going to follow random visions of weird blonde guy, because honestly, She has no reason to particularly trust that these are valid visions. But she goes, and he manages to save her. And then it winds up turning out that her mother was running away from a sorcerer, and that sorcerer is the reason that the North is able to is the reason why Mor woke up, and that there's this prophecy that Aerin has to deal with. Anyways, so Aerin defeats the evil sorcerer, and there's an amusing bit where it turns out that Luth has done something to her that has made her no longer completely mortal. And she's climbing for so long that she literally climbs upstairs for centuries, which we find out later when Luth shows up and basically informs her, so I had a bad time dragging you back several hundred years because you'd gone forward in time that far. And she's like, I was climbing for a long time, wasn't I? Yes, you were. Which is how she probably did become the goddess of climbing and then falling, which is a joke you will get when you reach that point in the book where... Anyways. So, what's very interesting in this book is there's this lovely nod to the complexity of human experience in that she falls in love with Luth. She is in love with him. They have this brief whirlwind affair as she's actually heading back to rescue Damar and heading back to what she knows will probably be marriage to Tor, who is going to be king after her father, because she does love Tor, and Tor is in love with her. But at the same time, she loves Luth, and Luth loves her back, and that it's this marvelous nod to the fact that people are too complicated to have just one soulmate, just one person who you'll be with forever. To say that there is only one person in the entire whole world who could possibly be perfect for you denies how complicated people are, denies how different relationships can be that can bear the same label, that your friendships with different people will all be termed friendships, but a friendship with the person who you're a nerd with isn't the same as the friendship with the person that you are a knitting hobbyist with. But they're both friendships, and that romantic love can be the same way. That's how people can remarry after they get widowed. It's because people are more complicated than that. And so at the end of this, Aerin goes back to Damar to rescue it and marries Tor. And the end of the book has this lovely line where this closing line, that perhaps the memory of the reek of Mor's despair made her a little forgetful too, for she began to think of the wide silver lake as a place she had visited only in dreams, and of the tall blonde man she had once known as a creature of those dreams. For the not quite mortal part of her did sleep, that she might love her country and her husband. She allows herself to forget Luth and lets the not quite mortal part of herself sleep. But she promises earlier in the book to go back to Luth, promises that she will come back, that they'll see each other again, and there's every indication and even implication in this that what happened when Tor died, when Aerin was left alone, that she went back to Luth, that she said farewell to Damar, that her time was done, that she'd served her time and would go back to the other man that she loved. And that complexity, that statement that people can have more than one important relationship, I think it's an interesting idea and an interesting notion and an interesting thing that she doesn't leave him. She doesn't say, oh, I have to leave him and that's the end of it. She says, and I'll come back when this is over. And there's probably more to say about this book, the same way there would be more to say about The Blue Sword, because they're both awesome books, but I'm basically out of time. So I will see you all next week.